I've been a hunter most of my life. My dad taught me when I was around 10. I grew up in a small town where hunting wasn't just a sport, it was part of life. Every fall, we'd disappear into the woods, just the two of us, and come back a few days later with stories, sometimes a buck if we were lucky. But life changes. I moved to the city for work, got married, had kids, and before I knew it, years went by without touching a rifle. Still, I always told myself that one day I'd go back, not just to hunt, but to feel that silence again, that stillness you only find deep in the woods. It was deer season. I took a long weekend, packed my gear, and drove a few hours out to a public hunting ground I'd researched online. I wanted to go far enough that it felt real, like how it used to be. The first day went smooth. I followed the marked trails, set up camp, and spent most of the afternoon tracking, but didn't see much. Still, it felt good to breathe that cold, clean air again. The next morning, I decided to push deeper into the forest, away from the mapped zones, just exploring. No real plan. I figured I'd be fine as long as I had my GPS and enough daylight. About an hour in, I found something unexpected, an old tree stand. It was worn out, probably abandoned for years, but still stable enough. I climbed up, settled in, and decided to wait. With deer season in full swing, I figured something would eventually wander through. It was quiet, peaceful. That kind of silence where every sound stands out. A squirrel, a bird, leaves shifting. But after a while, I got that feeling. The one that creeps into your stomach when you just know you're not alone. At first, I thought it was my nerves. Happens to everyone in the woods, especially when you're alone. But then I heard something. Not leaves, not wind. Something shifting above. The sound of branches creaking and leaves rustling overhead. I scanned with my binoculars. About 60 feet ahead, I saw movement between the trunks. Something was leaping from one tree to another, but not like a squirrel, bigger, human-sized. And it wasn't just moving, it was shimmering. I blinked hard, focused the binoculars. Whatever it wasn't solid. It bent the light around it, like a heat wave, like when you see the air ripple above pavement on a hot day. But even with the distortion, I could still make out parts of it. Long limbs, a tall, lean frame, and something across its back that looked like armor or plates. It had to be at least 7 feet tall, maybe more. The closest thing I can compare it to is the thing from the Predator movies. That half-invisible distortion. Except this wasn't fiction. I stared, frozen for a second. My heart was pounding. Then I adjusted my scope, rifle in hand. Not because I wanted to shoot, but just to be ready. I didn't know what this thing was, and the idea of pulling the trigger terrified me. What if it didn't go down? What if that just pissed it off? Then it stopped. Right in the middle of 2 trees, it turned its head and looked at me. Even through the camouflage, I knew. It saw me. We stared at each other for a second that felt like a full minute. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. Then it moved. Not fast. Not in a panic. Just calmly, it turned away and vanished behind the trees, silent, like it was never there. But just before it disappeared, I saw the air around it shimmer again. Not like heat this time, but like ripples in water. The space where it had stood wavered for a second, and then it was gone. That was enough for me. I climbed down so fast I almost slipped. I didn't pack anything. I didn't look back. I just walked, then ran, then sprinted until I saw the orange marker tied to a branch, the edge of the trail. I made it back to my camp just before sunset. I grabbed only the essentials, stuffed them in my truck, and got out of there. The whole drive home, I kept replaying it. The movement, the distortion, the moment it turned its head and locked eyes with me. I didn't tell my wife, not fully, just said I felt off and came home early. I still hunt, but now I only go to open areas, places where I know people are around. I invite friends, I check the map twice, I don't go off trail, and I don't go alone, ever again. Sometimes I try to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, or that I was tired or imagining things. But I can't forget how it moved, how it looked at me, how it knew I was watching. Whatever that thing was. I don't want to see it again, and I sure as hell won't step into a quiet, empty forest alone ever again, not even if you paid me. My name is Alex. I'm 34. And before all of this, I used to go hiking alone all over the southwestern U.S. Nothing extreme, just multi-day treks, far from the noise, far from everything. I always believed that as long as I had water, a map, and my knife, I could handle whatever came my way. Last spring, I decided to hike a section of the Arizona Trail. Not the whole thing, just 5 days between Patagonia and Oracle. It's a dry stretch, pretty isolated, but with incredible views. I had read on forums that it was a challenge, but not dangerous if you were well prepared. And trust me, I was. I went alone, like always. Brought my GPS, my water filter, a solar battery, and the basics for camping. My plan was to hike about 12 miles a day, sleep under the stars, film a little content for my small YouTube channel, and just disconnect. But from the second day, something felt off. And I'm not talking about the weather or the terrain. That morning had started like any other. The air was dry but cool, and the early sun painted everything gold, the kind of light that makes even rocks look alive. I packed up camp, made sure I left no trace, and hit the trail. It was quiet. That kind of quiet where you can hear your own breathing, your boots crunching the dirt, and not much else. The further I walked, the more alone I felt. I don't mean lonely, I like being alone. But there's a difference between being alone by choice and being made aware of how alone you actually are. Out there it's just you, the trail, and the emptiness around you. I passed maybe one dried-up creek bed, a twisted tree with a bird nest on top, and a stretch of open land where the grass was baked flat by the sun. No signs of people, no voices, no movement, and yet there was this weird pressure in my chest, like I was being watched, even though I hadn't seen a soul all day. By the time I stopped to set up camp that evening, the feeling had mostly faded. I found a small flat area off-trail near some boulders. Nothing too exposed, but open enough to catch a breeze. I gathered what little dry brush I could find and used my mini stove to boil water. Dinner was one of those vacuum-sealed camp meals. Beef and rice, I think. It didn't taste like much, but after a day on the trail, it might as well have been gourmet. I sat there for a while, just watching the sky turn from orange to deep purple. I remember thinking how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, just still. No insects, no rustling. Even the wind, which had been constant all day, had suddenly stopped. For a few seconds, everything just froze. Then, as suddenly as it had stopped, the breeze picked back up like nothing happened. I didn't think much of it at first, just a weird shift in the wind. But something about that moment stayed with me, like the air had paused to listen. After dinner, I cleaned up, packed everything away, and climbed into my tent just as the last light dipped below the hills. I was tired, more mentally than physically. That kind of tired you get after being in your own head all day with no one around to break the loop of your thoughts. Inside the tent, I zipped up my bag and turned off the flashlight. The fabric walls rustled gently in the breeze. I remember lying there, staring up, half awake, waiting for my body to give in. That's when I heard it. At first it was soft, just a shuffle. A crunch of dirt and loose stones, maybe 10-15 feet from my tent. I froze. It didn't sound like a coyote or even a deer. It didn't sound like any four-legged thing at all. It sounded like footsteps, slow, careful, 2 feet, one step at a time. Then silence. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just lay there, listening, eyes wide in the dark. My mind went into overdrive. What the hell would someone be doing out here at this hour? But the logical side of me kicked in. It's probably nothing, an animal or my imagination. Still, I slowly reached toward the side of my bag. I kept my knife there, tucked just within reach. My flashlight, too. I didn't turn it on. I just kept my hand near it, just in case. For a while, there was nothing. No wind, no insects, no crunching gravel. I closed my eyes again, trying to calm my breathing. Then, just as I was drifting off, I heard it again. This time it wasn't approaching, it was moving away. Soft, steady footsteps, the exact same rhythm, just fading into the distance. No talking, no flashlight, nothing, just walking, until the sound disappeared into the desert night. I lay awake for a long time after that, staring at the ceiling of the tent, waiting to hear it again. But there was only the wind. When morning came, everything looked normal. My camp was untouched. My gear was fine. There weren't even footprints around the tent, just the usual marks from where I'd walked the night before. I told myself it had to have been some kind of animal, something small, passing through. Nothing to worry about, but I still packed my knife last. And I kept it closer to my side the next night. I had 4 more days to go. The third day started like the others, quiet, dry, and still. I broke camp early and got moving before the sun had fully risen. The mornings were the best part of the day, cool, silent, and clean. I always felt like I was walking through something ancient out there, something that had been waiting thousands of years just to be left alone. By mid-afternoon, I had covered a good stretch. The sun was stronger than the day before, and I felt it more on the back of my neck. I stopped once to rest under the limited shade of a dead tree, drank some of my filtered water, and kept moving. I didn't see a single person, hear a voice, or even spot a distant hiker. Just the empty trail stretching ahead and the same dry wind brushing past my ears. It was late in the afternoon when I stepped off the main path. I hadn't planned to, but nature called, and I needed to find a spot away from the trail. I walked maybe 30-40 feet off course, just enough to be out of sight. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a pile of brush tangled up in itself, or maybe some kind of old tarp. But as I got closer, the shape became clear. It was a tent, collapsed, dirty, and sun-bleached. One side was torn open. The fabric had cracked and curled from exposure. Poles were snapped. It looked like it had been there for years. There was no gear, no backpack, no sleeping bag, just the frame of the tent, rotting into the dust. I stood there for a long minute, looking around. No footprints, no recent disturbances, just the same stillness all around me. The wind picked up slightly and flapped one of the loose corners. I felt something tighten in my chest. Whoever had camped there had been gone for a long time. That much was obvious. But why did it feel like they had left suddenly? I shook the thought off and turned back toward the trail. The sun was already dipping behind the hills, and I didn't want to be fumbling around for a sight in the dark. I made my way back and found a level patch just a short distance away, close enough to be convenient, but far enough that I didn't have to stare at that thing while I set up. I cooked a little something on the stove. Nothing fancy, just enough to get warm food in my stomach. And for the first time on this trip, I didn't go straight to bed after cleaning up. Instead, I sat by the fire. I don't know what got into me that night. Maybe it was the clear sky, or maybe I just needed something to shake off the unease from earlier. Either way, instead of heading into the tent after eating, I stayed by the fire. For once, the desert didn't feel so threatening. The wind had died down, and the air was just cool enough to be comfortable. I laid back on my sleeping mat, staring up at the stars. They looked sharper out here, like the sky had been scraped clean. After a while, I pulled out the small flask I always carry on longer hikes. Just a little whiskey, enough to take the edge off and enjoy the silence. And for a while, I did enjoy it. The fire cracked quietly, and I let my mind drift. No phone, no schedule, just heat, stars, and dust. It felt like the kind of moment I'd been chasing. I don't know how long I sat there, but I remember exactly when I heard the steps. They were light, steady, coming from the trail. I froze. The fire was low now, mostly red glow, not enough to light anything beyond a few feet. But the steps kept coming, measured, neither fast nor slow, just constant. My first thought was, no one hikes at this hour. Not out here, not on this stretch. It was pitch black beyond the firelight, and anyone hiking now would need a strong headlamp. But there wasn't one, no light at all. The steps got louder, and then, out of the darkness, I saw a shape moving along the path. A man. He was walking in the same direction I'd been hiking, a backpack slung over his shoulders, head slightly lowered. I couldn't see his face. He didn't have a flashlight. He didn't look lost. He looked deliberate. As he reached the point of the trail closest to my camp, he stopped, just for a second. Then he turned his head toward me. I still couldn't make out his features, but I saw his silhouette lift an arm and give a small wave. I hesitated, just a second too long, then raised my hand and waved back. He held the pose for a breath longer than I expected. Then he turned forward and kept walking, disappearing slowly into the dark. I sat there, completely still. Part of me thought about calling out, offering him a place by the fire, maybe a drink, a chat. But the rest of me, the deeper part, wanted nothing to do with him. Who hikes in complete darkness on a remote stretch of trail with no light? Who walks that steadily like they've done it 100 times? And why did he stop and wave at me, then just keep going like nothing was out of the ordinary? I watched the trail long after he vanished. There was no sound, no more steps, just the pop of the coals behind me. Eventually, I poured dirt over the fire, grabbed my knife and flashlight, and crawled into my tent. I didn't zip it all the way shut, and I barely slept. I woke up the next morning to the sound of birds. Not many, just one or two scattered calls. But it was the first time on the trail I'd heard anything like that. The sky was already turning gold, and the desert felt still and cool. For a moment, everything seemed normal. No signs of visitors during the night, no new footprints. My pack was still just outside the tent where I left it, and everything inside looked untouched. The fire was out, just a cold patch of blackened dirt and ash. The air smelled clean. Even the trail beside my camp looked undisturbed, like no one had walked it in days. And yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. I told myself I was just rattled from the night before, that seeing that man at that hour, with no light and no explanation, was enough to mess with anyone's head. But deep down, I knew the feeling wasn't just nerves. It was something quieter, a pressure, like the silence around me had weight now. Still, I packed up and moved out like usual. The day was uneventful, at least on the surface. I followed the trail, stuck to my water schedule, and stayed alert. The sun burned through the sky like always. A few times I paused and looked behind me, not because I heard anything, but because I felt like I should have, like something should have been there. There were no sounds, but there was a moment, late in the afternoon, when I stopped for a water break and I could have sworn I heard a second set of footsteps behind me. Just 1 or 2 steps, very faint, then nothing. I stood still for almost a full minute, listening, holding my breath, but there was only wind. I told myself it was my own echo or nerves or dehydration, whatever I needed to believe to keep moving forward. By the time I stopped for the night, I was tired, not just physically, but mentally. The tension from the past couple of nights had built up in my shoulders and jaw. I set up camp near a low ridge just far enough from the trail to be hidden, but not so far that I'd get lost in the dark. I ate in silence. No whiskey this time, no lingering by the fire. I wasn't scared exactly, just drained. So once I was done, I cleaned up and crawled into my tent. I zipped it shut and kept my knife and flashlight by my side, as always. But this time, there were no strange sounds, no footsteps, nothing brushing past the tent. It was quiet, and before I knew it, I was asleep. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when I heard it. A sound, sharp, frantic, not the subtle brush of wind or the distant creak of desert wood. This was something else. Running. I sat up fast, heart pounding. It took me a second to orient myself, but the noise was getting closer. Fast footsteps over dirt and gravel, stumbling like someone sprinting in panic. Then I heard it. A voice. Not loud, not yelling, but strained, like someone just barely able to speak through fear. I unzipped the tent in one quick motion and stepped out with my flashlight and knife already in hand. There was someone on the trail. It was the same silhouette, same build, same pack, same slightly hunched posture. Even though it was dark, I could tell by the way the shape moved that it was him. The same man from before. He was running now, full speed down the trail, his boots pounding the earth, his breath coming in bursts. His body jerked as if he was about to fall, but he kept going. He didn't look around until he saw me. He came within about 10 feet of my campsite before he turned his head toward me. His face was hidden in shadow, but his voice was clear. "Run," he said, almost whispering. "It's coming." Then he bolted again, no hesitation, no explanation. Just disappeared into the darkness ahead. I stood frozen, every hair on my body standing on end. I didn't even have time to process what he'd said before I heard the second sound. Something else was coming. It wasn't running the same way, it was heavier, slower, like something large moving on 2 legs but with uneven rhythm. Fast, then slow, then fast again. I pointed the flashlight in that direction, but the beam hit only dust and dry air. Nothing. The sound kept moving, though, following the path the man had just taken, and then it faded, swallowed up by the night. I was left standing there, alone, in the dark, shaking. I had no idea what I'd just witnessed. For a moment I thought maybe the man was trying to scare me, mess with me. But that didn't explain the thing chasing him. And it didn't explain how he knew where I was. I thought about running, just grabbing my essentials and sprinting after him. But I didn't even know which direction to go. I had no clue how far the next water stop was, or if I'd even find the trail again in the dark. So I did the only thing I could. I got back in my tent. I didn't sleep, not even for a second. I lay there, flashlight in one hand, knife in the other, staring at the fabric walls as if they could somehow keep me safe. The desert stayed quiet the rest of the night. No more footsteps, no more voices, just silence. When the sun finally came up, everything looked normal again. The desert was still. The air was cool, no footprints, no sounds, no sign of that man, or whatever had been chasing him. But I was different. I packed up quickly that morning. I didn't bother making coffee or taking time to enjoy the sunrise. I just wanted to move, get miles behind me, get closer to Oracle, to the end of this whole thing. I walked faster than usual. My body was tired, but I pushed through. I kept checking the trail behind me without meaning to, scanning the brush for movement. That day passed without incident. The sun burned like always. The wind was dry, the horizon empty. By nightfall, I set up camp again, one more time. And even though I was still alert, still listening, my body couldn't take it anymore. I collapsed into my sleeping bag after dinner and never even heard the world go dark. No dreams, no thoughts, just nothing. When I woke up, it was already morning, bright, quiet, peaceful. And I wondered, had something come during the night? Had it stood outside the tent again? Had it whispered something I couldn't hear? I'll never know. The final stretch of trail felt long but uneventful. I finished the hike without seeing another soul. No more voices, no more footsteps. Just me, the dust, and the miles. Since then, I've thought about that night more times than I can count. I've tried to explain it, blame the heat, the dehydration, maybe even a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But none of those answers feel right. I never told anyone, not friends, not family. I didn't post about it. I didn't put it in my videos. Some experiences don't need an audience. I still love hiking. I still love the desert. But after that trip, I took a long break. And honestly, I'm not sure when I'll go back. Maybe someday, but not yet. This happened to me last fall. I had taken a weekend off to go camping alone, deep in a forest I'd never been to before. I wasn't looking for adventure or anything like that. I just needed a break. No phone, no people, no noise, just me, a fire, and some peace and quiet for once. The place was about 2 hours from the nearest town. I found a spot off a dirt road, far enough from any trails that I wouldn't run into anyone. It felt isolated, in a good way. I set up my tent near a small clearing surrounded by thick trees. The air was cool and the only sounds were wind and the occasional crack of a branch in the distance. Nothing out of the ordinary. That first night was calm. I made a small fire, heated up some food, and just sat there for a while listening to the forest. No cars, no voices, no distractions. It was exactly what I needed. After a while, I went into the tent and read for a bit. I fell asleep easier than I expected. The second night was different. It started with footsteps. I was lying inside my tent, just trying to fall asleep. It was sometime after midnight, but I didn't check the time. At first, it sounded like leaves moving, soft, light, like maybe something small had stepped on them. I figured it was an animal, a rabbit maybe, or a raccoon, normal forest stuff. But then I heard it again, this time from the other side. It wasn't one animal, it was movement, coming from more than one direction. I froze. There were slow, steady steps behind the tent, then more. A little to the left, then again from the right. I stopped breathing for a second, just listened. It wasn't fast, it wasn't loud, but it sounded like people walking, not animals, not stomping, just steps, measured, careful. I couldn't see anything from inside, of course. I was zipped up in the tent. All I had was my little camping light and my pocket knife. I stayed still, hoping it would go away, telling myself it was just the wind, just my imagination. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I grabbed my book, thinking maybe if I distracted myself, the fear would settle. I turned on the light, sat up, and tried to focus on the page. I couldn't even concentrate on the words. I kept glancing toward the fabric of the tent, trying to listen over my own breathing. My ears were tuned for any sound, a crack, a shift, anything. Then it happened. Something ran past my tent, fast and close. I mean, right next to it. I heard the leaves crunch hard under whatever it was. It didn't sound like a deer or any four-legged animal. The steps were even, like something running on two legs. And then I saw it. A shadow passed across the tent wall. It was quick, a blur, but it had the shape of a person. Tall, upright, human. I dropped the book. My body tensed up. Every part of me went cold. I grabbed my flashlight with one hand and reached for the small pistol I had with the other. I never thought I'd need it on a solo trip, but that night, I was glad I brought it. My heart was pounding in my ears. I slowly unzipped the tent door, trying not to make too much noise. Then I burst out with the flashlight on and my weapon ready, expecting to see someone standing there. But there was nothing. Just trees, darkness, cold air, no sound, no movement. I turned the flashlight side to side, scanning between the trunks. Nothing. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes listening, waiting for something to move again. But it didn't. Just that thick, heavy silence. Eventually I lowered the flashlight. My hands were still shaking a little, but I tried to breathe slowly. Nothing was there. At least, nothing I could see. I stayed outside a few more minutes, just turning in slow circles, looking into the trees. But there was no sound, no wind, just that weird, unnatural kind of quiet that only makes your mind worse. I didn't feel better, but I also didn't want to stay out in the open. I went back into the tent and zipped it shut, double-checked the zipper twice, sat down with my back against the corner, my light still on, gun in my lap. That's when it really hit me. Inside the tent, I wasn't really safe. I was just hidden. If someone or something wanted to attack, I wouldn't even see it coming. The walls were just fabric. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. It was like locking yourself in a paper bag and hoping no one rips it open. I sat like that for a long time, eyes open, listening. I don't know what time it was when I heard the steps again. This time, they were farther out, not right by the tent, but still close enough for me to know they were real, not a dream, not an animal. I unzipped the tent slowly and stepped out again, but I didn't turn on the flashlight this time. I just stood there in the dark, letting my eyes adjust. It took maybe 30 seconds before I noticed the sound again. It wasn't footsteps now. It was a low growl, like something big, something angry. And then came the roar. It echoed across the trees, so loud and deep it almost didn't sound real. Like a sound you feel more than you hear. It didn't sound like any animal I know. Not a bear, not a mountain lion. It was deeper, almost unnatural. Then, from the other side of the woods, figures started moving. Shadows, dozens of them, all shaped like people, running. They were coming out from the trees, heading in the opposite direction of the roar, fast, silent, like they'd been hiding, and whatever made that sound had just found them. I stood completely still. I couldn't move, couldn't even think. I just stared as all these shadowy figures ran through the trees, not looking at me, not making a sound, just fleeing. I don't know how long it lasted, maybe 20 seconds, maybe a minute, but it felt like forever. There had to be 30 or 40 of them, all in black, all human-shaped, all running away from something I couldn't see. Then, as fast as it started, it was over. I snapped out of it and did the only thing that felt right. I ran. My car was maybe 100 meters from the campsite, parked just off the dirt path I came in on. I didn't even think about what I was leaving behind. The tent, my bag, my gear, none of it mattered. All I could think was, get to the car. Get the hell out of there. As I ran, I swear I felt it. Eyes on me, like something was still in the trees watching me run, deciding whether or not to chase. But nothing came out. Nothing grabbed me. When I got to the car, I fumbled with the keys, dropped them once, then got inside, slammed the door, and locked it. I started the engine and didn't look back. I drove the whole way back to town in silence. No music, no calls, just the hum of the engine and the sound of my breathing. It wasn't until I hit the main road that I finally let myself process what happened. What did I see? Why were those shadows running? What were they running from? I still don't know. I've searched for stories about that forest, legends, disappearances, anything, but nothing matches what I saw. No articles, no reports, no explanations. I don't even know if those shadows were people or something else. What I do know is I'm never going back to that place, and I'll be staying far away from the woods for a long time.